Penn State football coming into a big weekend for recruiting, and when that happens, of course, we have Ryan Snyder on the show because he's our recruiting insider that's going to give you the good stuff when it comes to Penn State recruiting and junior days, which are coming up tomorrow. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr, here on the BWI Daily Edition. Now, Ryan and I are going to get into some of this stuff. And Ryan, good afternoon. Hope you're having a good day so far.
Good afternoon, T. Frank. Good to be back on, man. I was on last week, so I was going to say it's been a while, but I was on last week, so never mind.
Yeah, there's always something around the corner with recruiting, or just bring you on and talk about football, seeing as you know more about the team and everything else other than just recruiting.
I know recruiting. I appreciate the pat on the bat. I know recruiting. We'll leave it at that.
But if you want to get some of the really good stuff and you want to get all the information from Ryan, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I got a little passionate yesterday about signing up, so I'll save most of that for another day. But sign up for just $1. You get into the On3 Plus articles. You get into the message board. You'll hear information before anybody else that's a Penn State fan, and you can go impress your friends later with that information. Sign up for just $1. Link is the first one in the description of the video, so scroll down. It says join in big, bold letters, and then you click on that, $1 for 12 months. And I was, not to flash around my cash here, but I've got almost 20 signups. And I mean...
Timer.
Look at that. I know there's a 10 in here. I've only ever done dollars on camera, so we're reaching a new level. You could have 10 people sign up for what I just showed you. That's just anyway. So make sure you sign up.
Me now. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
But we're talking about junior days, and what does that mean for a lot of people who maybe are watching and learning about recruiting for the first time? This is their introduction into it. The recruiting calendar is its own animal. So what are junior days? Why are they now? And how does this work?
Okay. So first off, we didn't have junior days in January last year. So that's a plus. Penn State did have what I called a junior day in the beginning of June. And it was a small one, only about maybe a dozen or so top prospects. And basically, I like to look at junior days as kind of an opportunity to lay the groundwork. And now when we go through this list, a lot of these guys have already been here before, but really it's an opportunity to get a bunch of guys on campus. And generic's the wrong word, but it's the opportunity to really show the generics of Penn State football, the baseline things that players are going to need to know, from, checking out throughout the last building to getting to know their position coaches in a positional setting, because of course there will be multiple guys at each position on campus. That's the perk of these junior days. So there are other visits that will take place down the road that I would think are more important, just because there are guys here who A, have been on campus before, but B, they won't get quite that personal experience that sometimes kind of pushes them over the edge to commit. Mm-hmm. Now, with that said, we have seen commitments in the past, and I'll never rule it out. But this is an opportunity to get 30, maybe up to 40 guys on campus. A handful of them have been here before, a handful of them haven't, and it's not just juniors in high school, or soon to be juniors. It'll be all 2023, 2024. We even have a 2025 prospect confirmed. It was called Junior Days like a decade ago, before everybody started recruiting eighth graders, basically.
It makes sense really, of like, okay, we're getting done with the class ahead of you. Now, welcome to the university. Here's what it is. Hope you want to come here. That makes perfect sense.
That's how it started. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how the name started. But really, I mean, it will be, at least for this Saturday, it will be primarily 2023 guys who are juniors, but it'll be a handful of 2024 and 2025 as well. And like I said, it's really just opportunity to show them the weight room, show them what Penn State can offer. Even around campus a little bit. It's a little cold, so they don't do quite the tours that you would see in the summertime. But tight ends will meet with Ty Howe, and all the positions will meet with their coaches. James Franklin will do a presentation in the team room. So there's a lot of perks to it. But it's not quite that real one-on-one kind of experience that you sometimes see during spring practice.
But it's a little bit more than what you get during an official visit during the season, right? Where coming up and watching a game, and then they have basically a day. How is it different than one of those?
Let me clarify. Official visit our official visits are like the kingpin visits.
Okay,
so it's not on that level, because official visits you can only do 5, and they're 2-day experiences, and you can only do it Well, now it's juniors from April on. So a lot of these guys who are here will probably take official visits in April, May, or June, and those are paid for by the campus. You stay here for 2 days, you get to hang out with some of the players on the team, and those are the top visit. I mean, it
Gotcha.
doesn't get better than that. Below that, I would say, looking like the Lash Bash, for example, that's kind of like that next tier where it is a group of guys, but it's a select group, the very best of the players, and it's really a lot of there's a lot of family with the Lash Bash. It's about getting to know other families, getting to know the players and their families, coaches' families, all that kind of stuff. That's the big thing with the Lash Bash. And then, I'd probably put junior days in that next tier. And then underneath that, probably game day visits. Yeah, because you're coming up, you're watching the game. Yeah, you might hang out with Franklin and staff for a couple minutes before, a couple minutes after, but you're not getting that, those long extended talks, maybe a 5-10 minute talk max.
You know what I love about doing this show with you? I've been doing recruiting for Blue White Illustrated for a couple years now, and I learn something every single time we talk. I learn a new facet of this every single time we do a show, and I know that means that our listeners are as well. So that's super awesome.
I'm still learning.
To get all of that.
I'm still learning.
Kind of like you laid it out perfectly, where it all makes sense now. I'm like, okay, I got it. That makes a ton of sense.
I left those personal visits out of it too. I would really do official visits at the very top. Those personal one-on-one visits that you see in the spring and the summer. And like, for example, I was talking to Phil Pachotti's family today, and like they're thinking about coming up to have one of those personal kind of visits in the spring. That would be kind of that second tier. Lash Bash is another group event. Junior Day is another group event. And then, the game visit, I put it at the bottom, but it is incredibly important, especially when you're coming to a whiteout. You're not touring campus. You're not really getting to see the Lash building. You're not getting to meet the staff. And that's kind of why it's towards the bottom of importance. But again, I mean, they're all important. You need to kind of do each of those rungs to really get the whole picture. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And how does this list for this particular weekend stack up versus previous lists? Is Penn State on the right track with the class of 23, which already is off to a hot start with some guys that have committed that we've talked about here on the channel previously?
Well, we didn't have them last year, and I'll be lying if I said I had my complete list from 2 years ago.
It's better than 2020 for sure, so that's correct.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I'd say this. It's about, I mean, from what I recall in previous years, it's pretty similar.
Okay.
You're going to have, like right now I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 4-star players. And scholarship-wise, if you don't include the committed guys, it's around 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that ballpark. So it's pretty similar, a group of 30 or so players. And out of, let's say, 10 to 12 have an offer now. Probably it would be more like 15, 16 of them have an offer, or they'll earn an offer at camp or something down the road. So and then you have some of the younger guys or friends of friends who, can maybe be a walk on down the road. But I don't know if they're quite Penn State level. But it's pretty similar to what we've seen in the past. You got those very top guys, and then guys that got a camp, etc.
So as I said, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Sign up for just 1/10 of this bad boy, and you will get all the information, and you can get every name. But what are some of the names you can share with us here on the YouTube channel as far as guys that are going to be here this weekend that are names that people should know?
Yeah, I'll share some of the top guys. No problem with that. So Samson Okunlola is one that I have very much circled. If I had to pick one guy who is most important this weekend, it would be him. 6'5", 293-pound tackle. Brother Samuel Okunlola, by the way, who actually committed to Pitt. Now, Sam and Samuel, Samuel, who's the older brother, and Samson, they never really got out for too many visits. And that's why this one stands out to me, because Penn State was actually interested in his older brother, and for one reason or another, he never made it here. And now they're extremely interested in Samson as well. Top tackle prospect. We have him at number 54 in the on-3 consensus. They're away at Thayer Academy, so they're not with their family. They're at like a boarding school, I guess you would call it. So it's been difficult for them to travel. So as long as he does make it here, this would be an incredibly pivotal visit for him, because I don't know how many more he's going to get. Not that he's going to commit anytime soon, but just it's hard for me to see him visiting Penn State 2, 3, 4 times. So he's a really important player. He's got offers from just about everywhere. And Thomas, I think you've Thomas. I don't know if I ever called you Thomas before. T. Frank, I don't know anybody else on the beat who has hammered home the importance of tackles as much as you. So I think anyone who's been watching this understands how important that position is in the portal in 2022 if they can add somebody, and then of course 2023 and beyond. So he's a top guy. Go through a couple others quick. Derek LeBlanc and John Walker. They're both out of Osceola, which is down in Florida. So whenever you got guys flying up here from Florida, that's huge. Both are 4-star players. Both are very important. It was funny. So Penn State originally offered Derek LeBlanc, and I had a conversation with some sources about him I want to say like maybe 2 months ago. And they offered John Walker around the same time. And I asked him like, hey, Walker kind of came out of nowhere. What's going on? And they gave me a funny story about how they were really just watching LeBlanc's film, and they just started questioning like, yo, who's this stud of a player next to him? And it just kind of snowballed from there. And, now he's nearly as coveted as LeBlanc. LeBlanc is 63 in the country, according to consensus, and Walker's all the way up to number 107 now. So it just was interesting how this guy wasn't really on Penn State's radar, and just from watching his teammate, he's now become one of their top prospects.
So they're from Osceola, Florida, not Phillipsburg, Osceola.
No, I'm sorry. I should clarify that.
No, you didn't. I was just making a joke. You were spot on. I'm being an idiot.
Florida. Yeah, Kissimmee, Florida is the town. I believe isn't Kissimmee like right outside Orlando? Like, isn't that where like Disney World is? I believe that's.
Oh, dude, I have no idea. I don't know Florida at all. I've been to Disney once when I was in high school. That was it. So no, okay. I don't have kids. I don't know what Disney World's all about.
Fair enough. But yeah, both, like I said, top guys with all types of top offers. All the Florida schools are after them. Notre Dame's after those guys, and getting them on campus is big. So let's see where it goes. The Florida guys are incredibly unpredictable. I don't know when the last time we had a Florida commitment to Penn State and his recruitment was like predictable. It just kind of who knows what's going to happen with those guys. So looking forward to try and catching up with them after. Roll through it real quick. Tamir Robinson coming back. Of course, everybody knows he's one of Penn State's top linebacker prospects. Of course, he had a big injury this year, and I believe this is his first visit to any school since getting injured. And his last visit to any school since getting injured was also Penn State, which was for the Indiana game. So I do think that's really notable because there have been so many schools trying to get him on campus since his injury. And for him to come back to Penn State for now, I think it's like maybe his 5th or so visit. I apologize, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's around 5. Maybe it's been over a half dozen, actually, if you go back to when he was a freshman. That's one of those things I won't forget, because he had a choice where he could go to a bunch of schools right off the bat here to come back to Penn State, a school we've seen many times. Definitely stands out. So there are a lot of other guys, man. Dylan Gooden, Doc Gooden's son, he's had a good counsel, really nice edge rusher. He's a guy who Penn State had on campus for camp. Getting him back would be big. Amir Herring's a nice interior lineman. Penn State's in a pretty good spot with interior linemen. So to me, it kind of feels like he's going to end up at Michigan. But just getting him back again. He was on campus for actually the Michigan game in November. And then just one other guy, Evan Link. This is another prospect who I've talked about a lot. He's right up there with Okunlola and a group of about 4 or 5 tackles that I feel like they have to have. And to me, Link right now feels like the most realistic. 6'5", 270. So he could be a little bit bigger. I've had some people say that maybe he's a guard. I'll be curious to see what his measurements are following this junior day. But all signs right now point to tackle. He's been to Penn State. I believe this will be his 3rd visit to Penn State, and I had a good talk with him this past week. He's in no rush. He'll probably be a summer commitment, but Nittany Lions are in a good spot, and they need quality tackles. I mean, they need quantity too, but quality is probably most important, and he's in that top 5 or so guys that they need to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so up today at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I'm playing around with what is the offensive line going to look like? What are some projections based on best case, worst case scenario, most realistic? And it's thin at tackle. Like it is just from guys that just play the position, that physically have the dimensions to play the position. It is a thin room. So having more of those guys, getting more of them on campus, obviously with a guy that's 6'8" Malik McNeil coming in, that's a part of it, but he isn't going to be here until later. So that's getting more of those guys is absolutely critical. How many junior days are there? Going back to some more education for everybody, how many junior days are there, and how are they stacked in importance from first to last, or is it just about travel schedule and availability?
Yeah, it's pretty much, hey, here's our 3 dates. Will you please come? Like, when
Yeah.
can you come up? Like, so, um, yeah, from what I've gathered so far, I mean, if you look at this list, there's a lot of top quality guys, and if you look at what we're building for the next couple ones, there's going to be some quality guys there. So, at first I was thinking maybe so let me clarify. I didn't answer your question actually. There's three: January 15th, January 22nd, January 29th. Those are, of course, the three upcoming Saturdays. And yeah, like I said, I mean, it looks like just an opportunity for whatever weekend you can make it up. Of course, all these other top schools are trying to get guys on campus as well. I mean, pretty much every top school in the country is going to be hosting junior days these next 3 Saturdays, because February then is another dead period. So those 4 weeks in February are always quiet, and then we get into March, and things start opening up for spring practice. So schools are going to be trying to cram in as many visits that they absolutely can here these next 3 Saturdays. And of course, Penn State's coaches are going to hit the road then too throughout the week, as they did in December. So there's a lot of action going on here, and I would expect probably about 100 players to visit over the next 3 weekends.
That's that's a lot. Because that was going to be one of my questions. But considering the number of offers that go out, does this start to narrow the list down a little bit for you? Of okay, they offer this guy and he came to junior day, so that is a guy that I now need to pay closer attention to. I know that there are names that have been, like you mentioned, Tamir Robinson, that has been part of the story the whole time. But does this kind of give clarification as far as where Penn State stands with some guys that maybe haven't been a part of the conversation yet?
Every visit. And, to me, it's just every visit. Every visit's kind of just another check in that with the RPM, how we have that machine there. I mean, every visit counts towards it, and it does matter. The old saying is just kind of follow the visits in recruiting, and you'll be able to figure out who the top schools are. And that nothing has changed. We used to have to say follow the virtual visits for the last year and a half, but fortunately, guys are actually getting on campus now. So, to me, it'll be more like when I'm really trying to figure out, this guy has Penn State in his top 3 or his top, it really will say top 8 or so. Mm-hmm. It'll be then maybe the 5 official visits that he schedules in the summer. That'll help me really kind of figure out where Penn State stands. But this is always just kind of a notch in the belt, and getting guys up are always good, man. You always want to get guys on campus as many times as you can. It doesn't matter what the event is.
Yeah, and feel confident and comfortable about that afterwards, and feel good about it afterwards is important. So this is as much for the fans and for Penn State faithful as it is for me. Am I going to have some work to do in the next couple of weeks? You mentioned there are some guys who commit. There have been instances of commitments in the past. Can you give us a couple names? And is there anybody you are kind of reading the tea leaves where you might have an idea that somebody might commit?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you look back in the past, right, the junior days don't lead to a ton of commitments. And again, it's because it's a very, you're trying to appease as many people as you can. You got 30 players on campus and all their families. So every junior day kind of has not quite 100 people if you include family, but like it's up there.
Yeah.
And, you only have so many staffers. So you're just trying to get as much time in with everybody, but it doesn't. When you compare that to March, when you're spending 8 hours with a player and his family and the whole staff's there for him, it just leads to different things. Now, with that said, could we see a commitment? Absolutely. I'm never going to be one to be naive. I'm not naive enough to know that commitments can happen basically whenever. When I look back at commitment lists over the years, for example, Charlie Katshier and Jesse Laquetta, they visited Penn State. I believe it was January 29th. I think it was right around 28 or 2017, maybe. I forget which year, but they were part of the 2018 class. They ended up committing a couple of days after that. Curtis Jacobs committed during a junior day, which was, I think, February 2nd, 2020. So we've seen a few over the years, but, a lot of these guys, this is still kind of the start for a lot of them. And I know Penn State already has 6 commitments. I believe Notre Dame's already up to 8 for 2023. But for the majority of these guys, especially when I look at this list this weekend, Tamir Robinson is really the only guy, and maybe Evan Link, we could say too. Evan Link, they've been on campus a couple times. I feel like they know what Penn State's about, but Dylan Gooden, John Walker, Samson Okunlola, Derek LeBlanc. I didn't mention Musa Kane earlier. He's another really important player. I think they need to take more visits. So to me, like right now, I'd be surprised if we see one Saturday, but my God, how many? I think we've done enough podcasts now that you could probably make a remix of how many times I've said that. So, and if you go over the course of 10, 12 years I've been doing this, I've looked silly many times. So right now I don't have anyone circled, but it's always possible.
I'll say this: when the last time you said that I remember a situation like that, the player ultimately committed and then didn't commit to Penn State. So I think your original, I think your original assessment was right there. That's probably accurate.
That was a fun one.
So one last piece of information today that came out yesterday for Penn State football, not for the class of 22, but for the class of 23. Penn State sent out a new offer. I'm sorry, for the class of 22.
Opposite.
Yes, yeah. For the class of 22, which wraps up in February, they sent out a new offer. Vega Ioane, I think, is his name.
For effort, bud.
It's always phonetic, so you always got to pronounce everything, and it sounds like it looks. I think when it comes to, I think it's a Polynesian name, so I went with Ioane.
That's how I would have said it.
So tell us what you know about this, knowing that it's really early in the process.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I knew a ton. Of course, I mean, we know he was committed to Washington previously. He's out of Washington. Graham, Washington is his hometown, and I believe he's up to 14 offers now. And I know he's being pursued by quite a few schools. He's a popular name. Of course, I'd actually like to see a count on how many of the top 500 guys are actually uncommitted at this point. I'd actually like to know that. It's probably down to 50 or so. So there's not much to choose from here. Minnesota, UCLA, Arizona, USC is a notable school, although I think that was USC's old staff. But, Penn State's one of the only schools, I believe, who have offered him since he decommitted, which I think was at the end. Well, it was when the coaching change happened, which I think was in the beginning of December. Of course, he didn't sign. So, yeah. So that's the only new offer I've seen so far is in regards to Penn State. But I do know a lot of schools are looking at him, and we'll see what happens here. I wouldn't be surprised if more schools come calling, and I'll be very curious to see if Penn State can get him on campus. They're not handing out this offer without the hopes of getting him up for an official visit, and that'll be something we watch closely in the weeks ahead. So what do you think, T. Frank? You've watched this film a little bit.
What I've seen is what you see here, and just snap assessments without watching full game footage is that he might be a great center. Even I know he plays left tackle in what you're seeing here, but he is fast. That is a fast football player, and I don't even mean by offensive line. The way he moves is great. Little stiff. Short arms, not a tackle. So sorry again to Penn State fans. I've given you this information, the burden of information now, and I know he plays tackle on film, but I see a guard or a center for sure. But a guy that can pull, he's definitely got power in his frame, and he can convert all of that at, I think he's listed at 6'4", 280. We'll, once we get the actual measurements on that, if he commits to Penn State, we'll get you a better, clearer picture of all of those things. But he's an interior player that can make a difference. You see there the tenacity and the run blocking. To me, the interesting thing is when this offer is coming. It's after the transfer portal has opened, and it's after they've seemingly assessed what's out there. Yeah. So what's your read on that?
That was where I was going to cut you off, which I basically just did. But yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing here. I mean, it feels like they have put their focus in the portal for, I don't know, 3-4 weeks now. And, they have Hunter Norzad out there, of course, the Cornell prospect who's going to take a handful of official visits. Penn State will be next weekend, and then Iowa will be the weekend after that. And although he does have officials to other schools, I mean, everything I've heard is that this is a Penn State Iowa fight. So we'll see how that happens. But yeah, I mean, the fact that this is coming now just tells me that they're not seeing a lot in the portal, and they know they need numbers. And as Andy Frank told us back on the early signing period in his Zoom call with us, I mean, they're always going to look for portal offensive linemen first because they feel like they can, they're just closer to being ready. And how many of these high school guys are close to being ready? It's incredibly rare. I mean, you've watched them all, T. Frank. Basically, none of these guys really are.
The most ready one was Landon Tengwall, who saw the field in week 12. So I mean, that's what the situation is. And what good is a guy that's going to be 3 years down the road contributing when you need somebody in September? So it absolutely makes sense. But they are at the mercy of the portal. And this is kind of a last minute kind of off the cuff question. But in the spring, we see some movement. Do you think there can be any hope, sliver of hope, that something breaks free after spring ball? Because
if you told me who's going to enter and if we had a magic ball and I could see and this is the problem with the portal. Like everyone's just like, oh, well, why aren't they getting anybody? Well, you don't know who's going to enter. And then, and Penn State's always going to be selective in everything they do. When Franklin got here in the beginning of his tenure here, they were a bit more off the cuff with offers. And if you go back and you look at some of those classes, of course, this was before the portal happened, but if you look at, some of the late offers they've handed out over the years, like none of them have really worked out. And I know this is different because we're talking about the portal, but I just feel like over the years, Franklin has become more and more selective on not just handing out offers like candy. And yes, when I say that now, of course, if you look at the 2022 offer list, it's gigantic, but that's
right.
This is confusing. This is a whole other podcast for another day. But when we get down to the end, they're always going to be selective. They're going to try and find the best guys. And if they don't find somebody they don't like, or that at least the group of recruiting staff and coaching staff or kind of met on, they're not going to go after them. They'll hold the scholarship because just in years past it hasn't worked out. So what I would hope for Penn State fans, especially the ones that are, so anxious and want to see talent come in at those positions that they're able to find somebody. But right now I'm not very optimistic. No, especially tackle, man. I mean, it's so hard at that and defensive tackle. Just if you are even like, a B kind of player at those two positions. Yeah. Dude, you're going to have offers from just about everybody.
Well, that's what Derek Tangelo was. Derek Tangelo wasn't an elite player. He was a good player, and he was a versatile player, and everyone wanted him, and Penn State was very fortunate, and they did a great job getting him and Arnold Ebiketie.
Because he wanted to come to Penn State his whole life, too. Yeah. Like that was –
That's a part of the story, too.
Yeah, if he doesn't have that like connection to Penn State growing up, like I don't know, if they would have got him. But just if you look at any of the defensive tackles and offensive tackles that have entered the portal who have been, we'll use PFF terms like a high 70, which isn't great. It's good, but it's nothing elite. Dude, they're getting offered by just about every top school in the country. So
yep. Last thing I'll say is I think based on what we just said, that the logical conclusion would be, expect Caden Wallace at right tackle next year. That's kind of what I'm penciling in at this point. And he was not a terrible football player. I think a lot is made of not being great, but he was not an awful football player the way that a lot of this is worked up. And probably some of that's my fault. A little bit of that's probably my fault too, of some, get a little frustrated watching the same mistake over and over again, but not anything that there are worse players in that play his position out there in college football. So
well, the one thing I'll say about Caden, man, is he did show improvement at the end. And I know you use those PFF numbers and I like to use them a lot. And I mean, he played 3 of his 4 best games at the end of the season. So that's great to see. And I always feel bad. I love Caden Wallace. Like, and I know you do too. Like the person, like he's one of our favorites on the team. And it's just, it's I hate ragging on him because I love that kid.
Absolutely. Yeah. And everything is there for him to do the job well. It just
it's unfortunate.
It just has to click. Like
he's a guard though.
Yeah.
He's a guard. Like I wish he could play guard because I feel like that's his future. And I just like you'd see him reach his potential more, but it's not his, he's just doing what's best for the team, and it's an unfortunate situation because I think if he got to be right guard next year, you'd see a hell of a player.
Yeah, and you would see a dramatic change in the Penn State offensive line. So we'll leave you on that note. Make sure you check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for work from him. He is Ryan Snyder, our recruiting insider. And if you want to dabble in some of the nonsense I'm writing down, I'm over there as well. This is the BWI Daily Edition. My new thing is if you're listening to the outro music, just hit the like button. Before you X out of the window, hit the like button. You watched the whole thing. You ate the whole candy bar. It was delicious.
Yeah. If you watched the whole thing, salute.
All right. We will talk to you next week here on the BWI Daily Edition.